great American Benjamin Franklin said a couple hundred years ago, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Think about that. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. And I've studied over the past couple of years in the habits of highly successful people is that they're thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead of time about what's coming next. For example, if it's summer, they're thinking about winter. And if it's winter, they're prepared for the summer. And when I thought about the theme of this meeting and what we did on summer vacation, I thought about the seasons. And seasons to me represent life. I mean, life is like, it mirrors the seasons. I mean, we're born, and then we spring, and then we go through adolescence. And then we all have that summer part of our life where we're active, where we feel like we're on top of the world. Or if you're a guy, you go to the gym and you can curl 45-pound dumbbells, and you want to show off your guns to everybody. And you feel like you're invincible. But everybody eventually gets to that autumn season where we all slow down. An important thing is to be prepared for that autumn season. One of the things I want to talk about in terms of being prepared for that autumn season is having a long-term care plan. If you're over the age of 50, having it for yourself. And if you're under the age of 50 like myself, and many of us in here, is having one for your parents. Because it's crucial. Why should it be important? Long-term care plan. Well, the numbers in 2006 for a one-year stay at a nursing home was just over $90,000. Average care for a home health aide at your house for a year was just approaching $50,000 in 2016. And let me let you in on a secret. Medicare and health insurance doesn't cover it. Why? Because long-term care is not a health expense. Those things will only cover nursing home care after a long extended hospital stay. So with costs like that, who's going to pay for it? The government? Your kids or your parents? I mean, somebody's got to pay for it, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. Now, besides why should you care, the statistics say that most of us will need some form of long-term care. I've been talking to my mom a lot about it, and she's kind of in denial. She's almost approaching the age of 60. But it's hit me personally, so I don't really need statistics, because my grandmother, throughout the last 10 years of her life, she burned about $300,000 on long-term care. And she was worried throughout the last years of her life that she was going to run out of money. So it's hit me personally. But I know we have operations researchers in here, and we have people that love number crunching and statistics, and I'm a physics major. So I crunch numbers too. So I'll give out the numbers. Who here, raise your hand if you have home or auto insurance? Please raise your hand. That's almost 90% of the room. Well, actuaries say that the likelihood of you getting your car totaled throughout your lifetime or having your house destroyed by a natural disaster is 25%. The Department of Home and Health Services says that the likelihood of somebody needing some form of long-term care after they reach the age of 65 is 70%. So the statistics say that most of us are going to need it. And that brings the question, well, what's the plan? Well, I'm going through that right now for my parents. That's one of the things I've been working on heavily throughout the past couple of weeks. But the key I could say is talk to a financial advisor and come up with a financial plan. And that's what I've been working heavily with, because I'm going to meet with my financial advisor during our 1-week break, and I've been burning the midnight oil, coming up with my financial plan. I have actually an agent calling me today to give me a quote on long-term care for my parents. So I'm going to be working it in my budget. I'm going to go to my financial advisor with information. So that's the important thing to do, is talk to a professional. But based on talking generalities here, I'll talk to generalities. So you have this end of the spectrum. If you have less than $50,000 in assets and you plan to be that way for the rest of your life, then long-term care is probably going to be too expensive. Your strategy should probably be Medicaid and rely on government services. Now, you could be on this end of the spectrum where you have millions of dollars saved up in assets. That's perfectly fine. If you have the money to cover long-term care out of your savings, it's perfectly fine. My grandmother used it for about 10 years. At $90,000 chop per year, that's about $1 million roughly. If you have $1 million saved up, then you probably don't need long-term care insurance. But if you're like me and you're like, I think I cover most of the population, then long-term care insurance is probably something you should consider. Now let me let you in on a little disclaimer. Long-term care is not cheap. I looked at the average cost, and like I said, an agent's calling me today, so I'll find out the cost for my parents. But the average cost for a couple age 50 is about $3,000 a year. So it's not cheap. But you got to think about the important thing of all this is to come up with a plan. Come up with a plan because you don't want to be a burden to other people. And you don't want to get to a situation where you're surprised and you don't know what to do. So like I said, know your situation, know your budget, talk to a financial advisor, see if you can work it in, see what you can work in your financial plan, but have a plan. I was talking to one of my classmates and he said his plan is after he retires from the military is go up to Washington State with his wife, buy a big house with a lot of land, have his parents come move in with him. And his wife's perfectly fine with that. He has a plan, that's perfectly fine. Me, I'm an introvert. I like being by myself a lot of times. I'm not around my parents, I love them, but after a week, so that plan for me might not work. And I noticed that they don't have a plan. So I'm going to get the cost of this policy. If they don't pay for it, then it's probably my best interest to pay for it, because I think their plan right now is probably to come live with me. And honestly, I love them, but I don't think I could give them the level of care if they get to that situation that they need. So you want to think about your loved ones and make sure that they're cared for properly. But the important thing is not to get to that situation and be surprised, because the statistics say the autumn season is eventually coming. You might feel like you're on top of the world now, going through the summer. But the autumn season is coming. And like Benjamin Franklin said, failure to prepare is preparing to fail.
And thank you, Michael. Michael's speech was number 6, only number 6. I would have sensed it was a number 9 persuasive or number 10 culminating speech. It was that good. Vocal variety, you're supposed to use pleasing voice and balance, the pitch, the tone, the rate, the volume, and especially be forceful and expressive. And he touched my heart in that speech with how forceful and expressive he was, talking about our sojourn in life and the third 30 or the autumn being when we might need long-term care. And then he researched that topic so well by giving us statistics about the number of people with and without financial planning for that. There were so many good things, including your quote, which you began and you ended with pauses in between so that we felt it, were fabulous. Your body gestures were varied. They didn't appear nervous. You seemed calm. I was amazed. You slowed down and became softer when you talked about the autumn and the end of life. And then when you were talking about speaking to an agent and the cost and making that appointment, you got a little fast, a little more stressed and tensed, as would most of us as we face that. Your eye contact was fabulous. The personal example of your grandmother burning $300,000 in long-term care in 1 year, I could have used a little more clarity on that. I'm not sure whether she spent that or her insurance covered $300,000 worth of care. A couple of those points I might have wanted more explanation of, but I was so overwhelmed with the persuasiveness of why we all, at any age, need to look at long-term care. And your personal example of your friend who's going to buy a farm in Washington and the family's going to be there and take care of someone and avoid those costs institutionally was so moving. It was fabulous. So my only suggestions were not about your delivery. It was about the content and making a little bit of those points about the cost and how we can save those costs in the future better. I really look forward to your number 9 and 10, my goodness. And I'm gonna check my own long-term health care insurance. Thank you.